You saw 60 Minutes, fat cats, the bankers headed to see the president. President is probably upset that small business has gotten shut out of a lot of loans. And that would be what one side of the aisle says, that these guys don't have any money to lend because they're paying themselves bonuses. The other side would say that small businesses are so unsure about their future, given health care and cap and trade and everything else, tax policy, that they're not hiring because of that. I guess you'd be in the latter camp.
Bank populism is nothing new. What we have here is a staged rhetorical onslaught, invoking bank populism to try and sweep through this huge regulatory overhaul. Look, on Friday we just passed Barney Frank's bill to basically have the federal government more or less take over the financial sector, have a permanent TARP kind of a system. And so, yes, there is a huge small business credit crunch underway. That's clearly occurring because of economic issues. And the big economic issue, as you mentioned, Joe, is the uncertainty. You know, small businesses don't know what their tax rates are going to be this year. They know in 2011 they're going up. We're passing a health care bill through the House that brings the top tax rate for small businesses in Wisconsin to 54.27%. So you have huge regulatory uncertainty. Cap and trade, they're trying to sweep that through, and they're telling Congress, if you guys don't pass this in Congress, we're going to have the EPA do it anyway. So what is a small business going to think about the future, where you have the specter of all these new regulations and taxes on the horizon? There is a credit crunch. You have policymakers in Washington saying lend. You have examiners at the banks saying tighten up, hold on to your reserves. So there's a legitimate credit crunch that's occurring out there. I talked to one of the biggest bankers in Wisconsin the other day who told me that of all their existing business lines of credit that are out there, only 22% of it is being tapped. That's an all-time low. So even the small and medium-sized businesses that have lines of credit aren't getting that money from those banks that they can because they are unsure about the future. They're hunkering down and not deploying.
We talk to businesses and they say the reason that they're not taking some of those loans is because there's not demand out there and they're not
That's
going
what
to
I'm
come
saying.
back.
Well, they're also hunkering down because they don't see a bright future. Why would you take risks? Why would you expand? Why would you hire more people if you don't think the future is bright or if it's really uncertain? We know the Fed's going to tighten at least maybe mid-2010, 2011.
Is it fair to tie that out and say that's because they're so concerned about all of these regulations that are out there? Or is it more of a question of, look, I'll order more stuff when I have people coming in to buy those things? Is it much more simple?
One precedes the other. I think the reason why we're not shooting out of this recession, usually the deeper the recession, the bigger the rebound. The reason we have a small and a short-lived recovery here that's pretty shallow, 3% growth, is because of all the policy uncertainty that is out there. Huge tax increases on capital, huge tax increases on income, more regulatory stuff. Who knows what the healthcare sector is going to look like? We might have a 23% payroll tax in this country if this pay-to-play tax in the healthcare bill succeeds. So with all that policy uncertainty on what your tax rates are going to be, no wonder the economy is not shooting out of this recession like a slingshot.
But you really think that they saw the Frank bill and as a smokescreen, they decided to ramp up the populist rhetoric against the bank?
We passed. No one's paying attention to this issue.
That's very diabolical, though.
So no one's paying attention to this issue. But yes, absolutely. I think we're talking about bank populism here. And believe me, I have my concerns about big banks as well. I'm really worried about a new kind of system of crony-capitalism where the big boys, cut the deals in Washington and the small guys are left out on the sidelines. I'm very worried about that.
It's already happened.
It's already happened, but I'm worried about enshrining it permanently with a permanent TARP kind of a system, which is basically what this financial overhaul bill is. This bill has passed the House. No one in America really knows what it is, and they're trying to move this thing through in a number of weeks to the Senate. And so, yes, I think they're invoking bank populism to try and bring this agenda through. Look at the agenda of this year. Take over the energy sector with cap and trade. Take over health care. They're trying to get this bill through before Christmas. Huge spending increases. Government agency budgets are up 24% since fiscal year 2008. And get this financial modernization or this bank overhaul regulatory system in place, all before you get into the guts of an election year where it's tough to pass things. So, yeah, we have a very ambitious government that has moved deeply left of center, and they're trying to move this agenda through very quickly before their votes start slipping away from them.
You don't like anything they're doing, Paul. Well, you're going to have to step up here to the plate and really, you're going to have...
Well, you too.
Look, obviously, you know my opinion.
As the journalist you are. Look, I mean, you criticize the economy for not rebounding like a slingshot. We're very close to positive jobs growth. You see the news about Citi today. The TARP's going to be real. I mean, do you give the government credit for anything in the past 12 months?
Not in policy.
Do you remember what it felt like when you sat here in March?
Right. I give the American economy credit. I give the entrepreneur credit for being resilient. But what should we be doing?
That's like saying that was a great movie. It directed itself.
Right, right. And the economy normally does. But take a look at where we're going with macroeconomic policy. It's the wrong policy. Higher taxes, higher regulations, far more spending, all on borrowed money, which is going to give us a huge debt problem in this country, which is going to debase our currency. We have a weak dollar policy right now. These things are a bad economic policy for the medium and long run, and I would argue also in the short run. And so when you're conducting this kind of economic policy, which really does put the federal government more in firm control of the economy, that's not good. And that is why I don't think we're having robust growth going forward.
President gives himself a B+. You give him a...
Yeah, well, I'm not a big grader, but it would be below a C, I'll tell you that.
Below a C. Gentleman's C.
How about a... there used to be incompletes, too, right?
That's right. Maybe.
Look,
pass, fail.
We didn't know what he was going to be like. I was hoping he was going to be a centrist.
You think he'd be elected today if they held the election?
No, I don't, but I was hoping he'd be a centrist. None of us knew him because he was sort of new. And unfortunately, what we find is a very, very left-of-center government here.